So Thomas Edsel asks, why are today's working poor so quiescent? I'm not the only one posing this question. In The Economist, David Samuels says, why aren't the poor storming the barricades? Why aren't voters demanding more redistribution of wealth? Why aren't Americans doing more to protest inequality, was the headline in the National Catholic Reporter. And Edsel suggests that there are a couple of reasons. He says, number one, poverty isn't as bad as it used to be, in part because the cost of many goods have come down: televisions, computers, air conditioners, household appliances, cell phones. In other words, we're getting cheap junk from China. Number two, he says people are marrying later, and therefore they're postponing the financial demand, to better earning years. And third, he says some economists contend that commonly used inflation measures result in excessively high estimates of the real world cost of goods. I don't think it's any of those things. I think those are all the symptoms of the larger problem. And the larger problem is the reason that working people in the United States are not rising up en masse, and although they may at the ballot box, particularly if Bernie is the Democratic nominee, but the reason that they're not rising up en masse right now is because, and Edsel talks about this, basically workers are being pitted against each other in the United States. Now, again, that's a symptom of the problem. He thinks that he suggests that this is something called individualization. He's quoting Ulrich Beck, a German sociologist, and he basically says that, when people who see themselves as friends, neighbors, and colleagues because they all work together suddenly are no longer working together but competing for the same jobs, they start viewing themselves as individuals rather than as a community, and this is why mass movements don't form. I don't disagree with that. But I think that what is causing this is the fact that our labor markets are loose. There are too many people chasing too few jobs. This is also known as unemployment. As Bernie Sanders points out, real unemployment in the United States is closer to 11% in minority community and African-American community. It's over 20%. In the African-American youth community, it's over 50%. Too many people chasing too many jobs. Now, why is that? And now we're getting to the real nub of things. And this is why Ann Coulter told Bill Maher, I believe, that Bernie Sanders could beat even Mitt Romney or Scott Walker. And because Bernie's the only guy saying this, who's running for president as a Democrat, it's our insane trade policies. We used to have trade policies whose first and foremost purpose was to protect American workers, and whose second primary purpose was to protect American strategic interests. So we had tariffs, import taxes on goods imported into the United States that reflected the difference of manufacturing costs from a low wage or a low environmental standards country compared with us. So if they could make something, here you make a pair of shoes, the example I always use, if you can make a pair of shoes in Connecticut with $1 worth of labor, and you can make them in China with 20 cents worth of labor, or you can make them in Mexico with 50 cents worth of labor. When they come in from Mexico, there's a 50-cent tax. When they come in from China, there's an 80-cent tax. So no matter where you buy those shoes from, it's going to cost the labor cost is going to be $1. And so the manufacturers, as long as that was the case, and that was the case in the George Washington administration until the Reagan administration, as long as that's the case, then you just keep making things in the United States. I mean, why bother moving a factory overseas when the cost to manufacture something is going to be identical? So, number one, our trade policies we've gone insane. China still has tariffs. They protect their domestic market. Japan has tariffs. They have not just tariffs, Taiwan, South Korea, all of the European countries. They don't just have tariffs. They have VAT taxes that they use that are functional tariffs that run anywhere from 17 to 30%. They have the country of origin labeling and requirements. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on all around the world where countries are acting in their own best interest, except for the United States. Why is this? Because the Supreme Court in 1976 said any billionaire who wants, any corporation who wants, can buy a politician. And so we see that these politicians, for example, who voted for Fast Track just yesterday, almost without exception, and there's a great piece in the Independent, or in the Guardian, about this just a few months ago. We're getting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions, and millions of dollars was spent lobbying for it. But it's really cheap to buy politicians relative to the amount of profit that you can make, which is why this town is awash in money. So that's problem number one. And problem number two is that when Reagan did his amnesty, he also stopped enforcing employer sanctions. So we have basically thrown open the doors for the last 40 years and said anybody who wants to come to the United States from any country, and it's whether it's, like I said, Europeans coming to work as ski instructors in the Northeast or in Colorado, or whether it's people coming to work in factories or meatpacking plants or whatever, or construction sites. We now have this exploitable labor pool, people who are here illegally or without documentation, and therefore the employers, knowing that ever since Reagan, no employer was going to be put in jail for breaking these rules about only hiring people who are American citizens or who have green cards, work permits. The employers no longer go to jail, so the employers are hiring these people like there's no tomorrow. In fact, they run ads in Mexican newspapers looking for work, looking for laborers, and they got nothing to worry about. We need comprehensive immigration reform that respects the people who are already here, in particular the young people who came to this country and people who have been born here. It respects them and their families, keeps their families intact, but puts an end to the incentive for more people to come to this country. In other words, we start putting some white, rich business people in jail. And, between having a reasonable trade policy and a reasonable labor policy, we could tighten our labor markets again.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-536-2370.
Now, here's the rub. You tighten your labor markets, and the poor will rise up. You will see a rise in unionization. You will see a rise in wages, and that's why the corporations don't want it to happen.